let me call the meeting back to order, and great thanks to Eric and Tally and the whole team. This is a great idea and a great activity, and obviously generated a lot of good interest. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
All right. So and we have I think there's a clipboard. If anyone wants to speak during public comment time at the back, there's a clipboard, and we'll do that at the end of the meeting. So the next order of business is the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, we have two sets of minutes here that have not been approved. We have the Electoral Board meeting of April 29, 2024, and the Post-Election Board meeting and canvass for the June 2024 congressional primary. Both sets of minutes have been circulated and amended as recommended, so I move that we accept these as corrected.
All right, I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So the minutes are for both meetings are approved. Okay, next we have a report from Electoral Board members. London, do you have anything?
I have nothing to add to what's already been said.
Okay, great, thank you. I have nothing to add. So next we'll go to the General Registrar's report.
Okay, just one item today. That is our open house that's coming up in August. Just to give you all a little bit of information about that. So on Friday, August 16th and Saturday, August 17th, for basically the whole day from 9 to about 4, we are going to have an open house at our office. We're going to have group tours at routine intervals. We're going to have a link to online reservations on our website. That'll be available around early August. What people will be able to do, will be able to sign up for a tour to go through the office and learn more about the process. Tours will probably be about 30 or 40 minutes or so. They'll have stop-offs. They're going to have several speakers that they're going to hear during that process. Probably groups of, 7 or 8 people or so at a time. So hopefully if there's several hundred people that are interested in this, we should have enough space to get them all through. Might be a great thing for people that are interested in, that are our election officers, members of the public, elected officials. The objectives here are to give the public an opportunity to see how the election process works, and to detail all the steps that we do to make sure that elections are secure, accurate, and transparent. So there will be a number of areas that people in the open house will be able to learn about. Election equipment, so learning about how a logic and accuracy test works, the things that we do to prepare the equipment for each election, because we do prepare every piece of equipment before every election. It's painstaking, it takes a long time, but we have to make sure that everything's accurate when we hold our elections. Talk about voter registration, the things that we do to clean our voter rolls, the processes that we go through, the things that we send to our voters to try to update that process. Voting by mail, how we intake mail when it comes in, what that process is like, what the staff has to check to make sure that we are following state code and accepting ballots properly, and then how we process that after that by the election officers. Results reporting, how we report results on election night, how that goes into the state system, how that comes out, the things that we do to make sure that it's accurate in the post-election process, and then election officer staffing and training, all of the time that goes into making sure our election officers are trained properly, how we figure out how many officers we need for an election. We'll talk a little bit more about that today. But that's what our open house is going to cover. So it is a little overview course. For those of you who are regular attendees of our meeting, it might be a review of things that you probably know from many of these meetings. But we're hoping you're all, of course, welcome to come and participate. But we're hoping that some individuals that maybe aren't as familiar with the process, some of our elected officials, members of the public will come and learn more about how the election process works. So that is the rough plan for the open house. Okay, any questions from board members about that?
You might want to try and get the county's communications office to publicize this, so
Yeah.
we can get the largest possible, and, you know, the media obviously as well, but, yeah. It's a good opportunity. I mean, you know, there are some people that are probably never going to be convinced about, you know, how elections are run, but I think it's a valuable opportunity to educate people if they want to be educated, and you know, let them see how, you know, how from start to beginning how the election is conducted. So,
Okay.
all right, new business, appointing election officers.
All right, so you all both have a list in front of you. You were emailed as well, so we've been doing a lot of different recruitment things. Office completed a targeted mailing to 5,000 primary voters, so John did a lot of data work on this and dug into the locations where we really need officers, but also particular officers. So maybe it's a location that's a heavily Democratic area and we need Republican officers, or a Republican area where we are short on Democratic officers. And we took data from the voting history of the primary elections that we've just had and sent out targeted mailing to voters of sort of the opposite party of what we currently are overstaffed with in that area, to try to bolster our numbers, to continue to try to make sure we have parity at all of our polling places. The Electoral Board, London and Mark, sent out a letter to more than 500 active Republican officers and asked them to, you know, text a friend, talk to somebody they know, try to recruit another fellow Republican to work the polls in November. We also reached out to 1,500 nonpartisan officers to see if they were interested in perhaps joining a party. Some of them are sort of legacies from years ago when there was a different process for this. So, and then we also have promoted this with county newsletters. So internal newsletters in the county and county employees, public newsletters, that's helped promote a lot of officers. So a lot of efforts this summer. I know the November election is still a ways away, but we set a target goal of early August to be done with all of our recruitment efforts, and a deadline where we basically said after, is it August 6th, John? Do you remember? August 2nd, okay. August 2nd, that if we haven't gotten an application by that point, we're probably not going to be able to have those officers work, because we have to go through the process where the party chairs give feedback, you all approve them. So we're hoping that by that date, we have everybody we need. You all have a ton of individuals today. I know that we already have another, probably, I don't know, Rick, what number are we at this point? More than 100? Okay. So another 100 officers that have applied, and we hope that will continue through the start of August, so we have a lot of people. I will say this in terms of retention. We do a post-election survey of the officers, asking them about things, having them rate us on, you know, how we're communicating, how their training is, a whole variety of different topics. It's stuff that we've now done for several elections, so it's given us some longitudinal data to look at and see where we're going. I think we've showed improvement in a lot of areas. So 83% of those individuals rated the communication from our office to the election officers as excellent, with 97% of them being positive. And that excellent percentage has really grown. The last three elections has gone from 68% to 71% to now 83%. So I have to say outstanding work by Dina and Rick, who work to communicate constantly with our officers. Anytime I'm going back to their office or going by their office. They are on the phone. There's a lot of noise. That's how things should be in the election officer corridor. So that is a huge improvement over the last several years from us. And the results of that were very clear this past couple elections. We just had no staffing issues in March and June, just well-staffed polling places ready to assist voters. In terms of chief evaluations too, 91% of the officers are rating their chief as excellent. 92% of officers report they're very likely to work in a future election. So these are all excellent things. We need to recruit more officers, but retaining the ones we have is also a key part of the process. You're always going to lose people to moving, to life situations, to health, to age, but we want to try to retain people as best we can. So you all have there in front of you today, we had 353 total appointments. I think it's actually a little less than that. We have 224 new officers, and we had 129 officers requesting to represent a party. 15 of those were rejected by the party chairs, but the majority of them were accepted. So we have a lot of new officers there, including a lot of Republican officers, which is always our area that we're working to make sure we have enough of. So this is a really good step, continuing step in a couple of years of really heavy recruitment and efforts to make sure that we are well-staffed for the election. I said, when I first got here, I said, well, if you need this many people in your busiest election, if you need 1,000 people in your busiest election, then you really need over twice as many officers that are active to be able to do that. And we are getting to that point. We're moving past that point. So I think that bodes well for the future of our election officers. And you know, just to be honest, they do outstanding work. We really had so little problem this past election, so few complaints. They're giving good customer service to our voters. They're following the rules they're supposed to be following. The party representation is there to make sure everything is in check. And so the list you all have there has been reviewed by the party chairs, and they have had a chance to review everything, and that is the result of that, all those officers there.
There are 353?
I think it's minus the 15, so it's really 338. And there was no new officers that were rejected. It was just a few of the officers that were requesting to represent a party, 15 of those. So it's really 114 officers requesting to represent a party, and we got a couple late feedback from the party chairs last night, so we were able to incorporate that in the list you have, but I did not change the slide in time, clearly. So,
okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept these 338 new officers.
I'll second that. Any discussion? One question. So how are we doing in terms of recruiting Spanish-speaking officers?
I mean, we have quite a few at this point. John, do you have any additional?
I know we do have quite a few.
Yeah.
And we actually do focus, and we make sure that we have a Spanish-speaking officer at the precincts that really need them. For example, households that have 40 to 60%, or precincts that have 40 to 60% of the household that only speak Spanish at home. We focus on those 10 precincts. There's really 10 of them. Also conducted, I guess, I did an interview with Univision, and they had a media, I don't know when they played it or they've even played it, but I had an interview with them where I emphasized that Prince William County is always seeking more Spanish-speaking officers.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are our two main outreach efforts, is more Republicans and more Spanish speakers. If we have two, sensitive groups that we're trying to up more than anything, it's those groups. And the polling places do have language tools to assist voters, even if we don't have a Spanish speaker there. But ideally, in the longer term, it would be great if we had a Spanish speaker in every precinct. But at least for now, we know we have them in the precincts that need it most.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. So these officers are all approved. Next item is training plan.
Okay, so our training plan, now we don't have any significant law changes that impact the preparation of election officers this year. I provided all the board members. The state gives a nice summary of the election laws that are in play. There are some for us at the administrative level that we have to make some modifications for, but fewer than any year I can remember in the last 5 or 6 years in terms of the polling place. And that's great, given that, we've had a lot of elections recently. We have officers trained to, specific things, so not having changes there makes things a little easier in a presidential election year that's busy. We have updated training for, the state has modified the provisional envelope design slightly, so we're preparing some special training for that. I know John has produced a video that we'll post online to give officers a resource to look at that a little bit more. We have some, little tweaks to our processes. We'll have to remind officers about the procedures and their practices, so we'll have to do that for this election. In terms of our types of training, we have all officer training, which is something everyone has to do, virtual or in person. Some of our officers do prefer to do that in person. I think we're at like maybe 60-40 virtual versus in person. But we have the virtual option, so that's a little more convenient for people where they can join the training from home, but they do have a live trainer for that. Leadership certification training, that is an in-person course that is 4 to 5 hours, depending on how fast that particular person is at closing down and opening up their equipment. They get a lot of hands-on experience in that class. We did that last year, but now that we're in a new election cycle for us, we really, for the public, our election cycle really starts once the new fiscal year starts in July for the November election, and things tend to stay the same into the primary just because our law changes generally happen in July. So we had a lot of officers take that last year. We had good feedback. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But we're going to continue to do that. So all of our officers that are going to be in leadership positions will have to do that certification training for this election. And we are, for that reason, starting it sooner than usual. We have a new chief orientation. So if they're a new chief, we have a couple classes just for those particular individuals to walk them through. They'll have to do the leadership training, but they also take that new chief orientation to kind of give them some tips and tricks on how the process is going to work for them. Additionally, new officer training is an in-person training. So if there is someone who is a new officer, and we're planning for having a lot of this particular cycle with so many more officers needed and so many more officers recruited, those officers are going to get that in-person training where they get some hands-on experience, where they can ask questions. They're in a smaller classroom environment than the sort of large all-officer training, which is more of a review for experienced officers. And then the last thing, which is new this election, is the director meeting. So there's going to be a virtual meeting about a week before the election. This will give us a chance to talk about maybe some things that we noticed during early voting, if we see any problems, if we see voter behaviors that are causing challenges for officers, and also give all of the chiefs a chance to ask questions and that kind of thing. So that's the new thing we're going to do about a week before the election, to make sure that all of our chiefs have a chance to be apprised on the latest things that are happening, because we prepare for things now, but we might get to start of October and realize that there's a few things that are going on. So
that's only going to be for the chiefs, the director?
Yeah. Now it is virtual, so I think we'll extend it if other, like assistant chiefs or the EPSs want to join as well. I think we can do that. The capacity of the online meetings is, theoretically limitless. In practice, it works pretty well up till you get about, a couple hundred people, and beyond that, it gets to be a little bit difficult to manage. But that should be more than enough for the leadership groups. So training ratings from our June primary, we had 59% of our officers rate the all officer training is excellent with 97% positive ratings. 67% rated the new officer training is excellent with 95% positive. And scores have consistently improved. So Tommy and his team should get a lot of praise. We have expanded our training team a lot and had more people add to that over the last year and a half, because one of the things was we were kind of killing Tommy as of last year. So we want Tommy to be healthy and get to enjoy his retirement years at some point. So we needed to get him more help and more assistance for class. I think classes go better too when you have a team of people there, because sometimes you might be leading the team, but somebody might need a little bit of help. So that team approach is something that I found in DC was really helpful. So we have a team of 6 or 7 individuals, including Tom, who's sitting right there today, who help with training. And we have seen, those scores steadily improve. Now, we asked them to tell us the all-officer training what word they would use to describe it. And thankfully, it's mostly positive. 80 engaged, 57 satisfied, 5 bored, and 3 overwhelmed. I think that's a very good board rating because, to be honest with you, it can be a little boring if you've worked a lot of elections, so to have it be at that small number of people having rated as bored is really good. In terms of the leadership training course, we got even more positive feedback. 63% rate the course as excellent, with 98% positivity, and 69% of new chiefs rate the new chief orientation as excellent, and we had 100% positivity on that. So, as I tell the staff, always things to improve, always things to learn from, and these survey results, not only do we see kind of where we are quantitatively, but we get qualitative feedback, we get, suggestions and ideas that will help us this fall. And so Tommy and the training team are working to incorporate that now so that we're ready when we get around to the fall. I do have to compliment the officers in terms of, those are our survey results, but our real world results in June, I really stressed the officers that we wanted to make sure to get results in by 7:45 and to make sure they're accurate. So, it's really important this happens in a timely manner. We had 101 of 103 precincts that reported their election results by 8:05. The vast majority of the officers, the chiefs, met that 7:45 goal. So because of that, Prince William County was the first Northern Virginia county to report all their results by 8:15. That's the early voting results. That is the mail voting results, and that is all the election day results from the precincts. So we had 2 calls we had to make. I think we've stressed to them to make that better in the future, but I'll take 101 out of 103 by 8 o'clock is great. I'm sure we won't do that well in November because we're gonna have precincts that are gonna have voters in line at 7:15 and 7:30, but I think that we've really emphasized over the last couple of years, make sure to get to your equipment first in the morning. So if there are problems, we can assist you and we can respond to that, because if somebody calls at 5:57 and said, hey, I just started opening my machine and it looks like I have the wrong one here, well, there's not a lot we can do at 5:57 to have the polls ready 3 minutes later. So, and then at the closing, we've asked the precincts to, make sure to prioritize closing the machine and getting those results into us. And from Canvas this election, all results from precincts were 100% accurate. They even got all the little under and over votes correct. So that was fantastic work from our chiefs. So thanks to all of our chiefs. They did an outstanding job, and all the people that were supporting them. I know it's not always the chief that's the most tech savvy that's reporting the results either, so I'm sure there's some assistant chiefs and EPSs who are getting that job done out at the precincts. So, training plan for this election is the chief, assistant chief, and the EPS. That's our equipment and provisional specialist. That we have 3 people that have to complete that whole certification course before this election. They will have to also join the all-officer training. I think that's helpful because then they get to see what we're emphasizing with the officers. If they're a new chief, instead they will take the new chief orientation, and then they'll need to attend that director meeting. I should say it's the chief and the assistant chief. But we will welcome the EPSs if they would like to join that as well. And we'll record that meeting so that if someone can't make it on that particular night, I think we're going to do an evening meeting to make it easier on people's schedules. Probably be an hour or less. We'll have a recording of it so people can review it before the election. For our first-time officers, they need to complete the new officer training. For our election officers, they have to complete the all-officer training. And we do workshops towards the end too, so that people can review. If they need assistance, they need help, they can come into one of those workshops and get some help as well. So that is our training plan, and the board has to approve it per Virginia code, and happy to answer any questions. John might be able to answer them as well if you guys have any thoughts, feedback, questions, suggestions, changes, additions.
And you've identified good workable locations for all these,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, we've expanded. We have Buck Hall locked in for a longer period this election.
Yep.
We've all,
Yeah,
okay.
August 22nd is our first move-in day at Buck Hall. And then the Haymarket Library. So since we reserved it for 6 weeks for the early voting election, but now that we're only going to open it during the final 2 weeks, we bought us 3 weeks of training space.
Oh, good.
Yep.
So we've got a good long period of training space. The other thing with that director meeting is that the chiefs and assistant chiefs have to have a certain amount of training within a certain time frame each election in that last 30, not more than 30 days before and not less than 3, I believe it is. So having that enables us to do some of the other trainings. So it's a multi-layered training. So we'll be able to start sooner than we normally would, because trying to train, if we have a long certification course that is more intensive and has fewer trainers, we need more time to be able to accomplish that. So this really lengthens our training schedule, and we're going to be, interacting with our officers at multiple points as we get towards that election. But yeah, we have space secured. Do we have any word on Hilton yet?
No.
Okay. We were looking for a live officer. We do them at McCourt. We were looking at maybe a larger facility to have a sort of like large class. We were talking about seeing if Hilton Performing Arts or something like that might be available during the day when they're often not as busy. So we're checking into, we are making sure we have lots of space and lots of time for all of our facilities and backup plans.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the training plan pursuant to VA Code 24.2, 103 and 115.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Thank you. So next is early voting hours.
Okay, so the new early voting ordinance was passed on May 14th. We have gotten word from the Attorney General that this is, they got back to us and told us that we actually, since we didn't change any of the locations, that we actually don't even need, a sign off from the Attorney General's office. Our county attorney, I spoke with the county attorney's office. We're going to have them send us something just to just to have something in writing to confirm that. But it looks like we are all good for our new early voting ordinance. This codifies the day open by each election. But the ordinance does say that the electoral board must define the hours of operation for the early voting sites. So early voting hours must be compliant with VA Code 24.2-701B, which says that for the required Saturdays, which is the Saturday before the election and the Saturday before that we have to be open for at least 8 hours. So that is one standard we have to meet. The new ordinance states that the satellites must be open for 6 hours at least on the days they're open. So hours that the board decides must reflect that base requirement. And the satellite locations in the ordinance have to have identical hours on the days that are open. So that is our list of requirements. So looking at the November election in green here, you'll see the days that the different locations will be open. So the main office is open the same as before, just before 45 days on that Friday. I believe that's September 20th. Okay.
September 20th.
Thank you. September 20th, that'll be the first day the main office is open. So it'll be open for those next 3 weeks for early voters. And then it'll continue on with all the other satellite locations. And then on the satellite locations will open on that Sunday, so 3 weeks and 2 days before the election. All of our satellite locations will open. The satellite locations include the DMV over at Caton Hill, the Haymarket Gainesville Library, the Ferlazzo Building down off Cardinal and Route 1, the Dumfries Community Center also down by Route 1, and then Brentsville, which is sort of at near the crossroads of the Brentsville and Coles district there, just off of 234. So those are locations that we've used in the past, but what we've had in the past is we've used different locations for different elections. They're all going to be open. This will be especially useful this election. We have emailed back and forth with the board about the proposals. We've had discussions with staff, And our proposed hours from the staff's recommendation would be weekdays the same as we've done from 8:30 to 4:30 with an extended day on Wednesday. This was a suggestion of the supervisors that we maybe have an evening option for some of our voters that are commuters or working during the day, so they'll have an option. So we suggested trying this out this election and having one night, so every Wednesday at the main office and our satellite locations, so that's 6 Wednesdays total. We would have evening hours, so voters that are getting off work then can stop by and vote. We then, of course, have 3 Saturdays, and we also have 2 Sundays. We recommend the Saturday hours remain the same as that they've been, 8:30 to 5 p.m., and that the Sunday hours would be from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. And we are talking about this in July because we want to make sure that voters have plenty of time to, adjust to this so we can get all this information up on our website and give everyone a chance to sort of, to educate our voters. In that sense, we're going to send out a voter guide going to all Prince William County households by mid-September, so just before early voting starts. We'll get them that voter guide. It's going to provide information on the new early voting locations, the dates and hours. It's going to provide other helpful information to voters, including voting requirements, such as, reminding them they need to take an ID when they go to the polling place. Talk a little about, some of the election security measures that are in place so we can educate the public on a number of the things that we do to prepare for each election. And then also remind them about the voting by mail option. So communicating things to voters like if you want to sign up for vote by mail, you still get a sticker. That's, I don't know if that's a hindrance for a lot of voters, but if it is, you can also still drop your mail off at a polling place. You can also, sign up for voting by mail and then decide you want to vote at an early voting site or on election day. So we're just trying to provide more education on all of these options, whether you're an election day voter, an early voter, if you vote by mail, have all the options and information that you'll need to go out and vote for the upcoming election. We are looking at increasing capacity, so all of our early voting locations, we're expanding poll books. Myself and Carol Schwalm, who's back there, thank you, Carol, and she manages our early voting process and all the staffing and all the sites, does a great job with that. And me, her, and John went out to our different sites to look at, okay, we're going to need to get more people through. How can we modify this space to have more capacity? So we went to the locations, and we're looking at DMV and Haymarket, and for Lazo in particular, to sort of expand the capacity. And we've usually had 2 poll books at each. We want to have 3 poll books at each. Same with our main office. We want to, when you expand the number of poll books you've got, you need to have more voting booths. Otherwise, voters are just waiting for a voting booth. So we've looked at all that, and we're expanding that space. The DMV in particular, we moved a bunch of furniture out of there, and we're going to expand from 2 poll books to 3, and we'll have a lot more voting booths there for voters to go through. Same thing at Haymarket, same thing for Lazo. So there might be times where we don't necessarily need them, but the space will at least be set up and ready for that. We did some calculations on this. I figured out that if people used early voting, we could get close to 150,000 voters without even having a significant wait time if they went out and used early voting. So that's fantastic. Mail voting is always an option, but the goal with some of these things for us in administration is to make sure people are using some of these, things. They obviously have the option to do what they vote, how they want to vote, and where and when they want to vote. But if we have a certain number of people use early voting, a certain number of people use mail voting, that makes election day a lot easier. That prevents some of these things that we saw back in the early 2010s, where we were looking at, huge lines and problems and people, in line at a polling place and not voting until 10 o'clock at night kind of thing. So we want to make sure to avoid that. So the early voting hours does require board action due to the Prince William County ordinance. So I'll go back to that slide with the hours on it there.
I make a motion that we approve the hours as explained by the GR.
Second, any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. So, thank you. I know you've spent a lot of time and energy working on this, and I think it's probably the most important thing is going to be, educating voters about the early voting. The first day is only in Manassas.
Yeah.
Because, I've already heard from people, well, I want to vote at the DMV. Well, you can vote at the DMV if you wait a couple of weeks, but we're not going to open them all on the very first day. But, again, the help of the county's communications office so that, and I know that in 2020, there was a huge increase in the number of mail ballots also. So emphasizing that and making sure that, the instructions, if someone requests a mail-in ballot, I know Colleen and her team would prefer that they not have to put any ballots into the cure log. If everyone would fill out the outside envelope correctly and put all the information that's required, it would make it a lot easier for her team and for the two political parties also. So, but I think the expansion of and especially, we've never had 2 Sundays and I don't believe 3 Saturdays in a row where we've had early voting. So that's a big plus.
Yeah, I think 5 weekend days is going to be huge. And, I think also John for looking at a lot of the data from previous elections to, figure out what kind of makes the most sense here as we were developing these plans. And I think what we'll also do is after this election, we'll provide the board with some of the data on, hey, how many people are coming on this Wednesday evening? Maybe we see a ton and we want to expand that to 2 nights in future elections, or maybe we just see it's not used and it's not worth the time. And so we'll provide, more data to the board so that we can, give you guys everything you need to make the decisions on this going forward. And this will be our first election with this new system, so we're going to advertise it heavily, and we do partner with the county communications office to promote more information about this, and they've been very active in not only responding to us, but communicating with us and talking to us about our plans. So we're meeting with them continually this summer and into the fall.
Great. Next issue is ballot order. And this is not the order that names appear. The state determines that. And
Yes.
I believe they did the drawing, and so I think the Democrats are going to be listed first in all the races on the ballot. This is the order of how many ballots that we order from the printer.
Yes. How many will we purchase from our printer so we make sure to have enough on election day? So you all have in front of you here, and supplied this to you all last week, the projections. John and I have gone through this a bunch to sort of, we start off with all these things, and we're going to talk about the staffing and the equipment after this as well. They're all kind of connected. But we start off with by looking at what we expect, what we project for the number of voters that we're going to see, and we try to plan for the high side of that. So we don't want to say, well, could be 75%, could be 85%, could be 68%, and we don't stop at the low number. We plan for the high number, and we plan for a larger percentage maybe than we expect on from early voting and mail voting. So while we expect 100,000 voters for mail voting and early voting, we're going to plan for a little more than what we expect to need on election day, because with mail voting, we're here and can process as many ballots as people ask us to mail them. For early voting, we have kind of capacity limits based on the size of the location, so we have expanded those, as I've talked about earlier, as much as we can. But election day, we need to make sure to be prepared in case we have maybe higher turnout than expected, or in case we have fewer voters utilize early and mail voting than we anticipate. So you all have kind of a projection of roughly what our numbers are there. I will note too that we had to plan for a surge in registrations. John did some research on where did our registrations go just before the last two presidential elections? And I think it was pretty consistent. It was about 14,000, 8 years ago, and about 15,000 4 years ago. So 16,000 would be a pretty good guess. So we expect with the county continuing to grow, and there's always a lot of updates to people's registration. They get registered, they realize they're not registered. Maybe they moved 2 years ago and they haven't voted, and they realize they need to register for this election. So we planned with this in mind. So these estimates are not based on our current total registered voters. They are based on those planning for those additional voters. So upwards of 340,000 voters. Maybe that doesn't come to fruition. If it doesn't, that's fine. We're still prepared for it. So we think about early mail and election day voting, that surge in voting, that all goes into our preparation for what our turnout total is going to be. We're recommending a total order of 264,400 ballots for election day. That's roughly about 2,500 ballots per precinct. If you look at your chart there, you'll see that most precincts have far more than they need. 101 Brentsville, we expect about 1,500 voters. We're going to get 2,500 ballots. 104 Nokesville, we expect about 2,000 voters. We're going to get about 3,400 ballots. In addition to the regular ballots, we're also going to order 200 or 300 additional provisional ballots at each precinct. So we're expecting more provisional voters than usual, especially with this being the first presidential election since same-day registration has been added in Virginia. So we want to be prepared for a lot of provisional ballots this election. Your guys' post-election provisional meeting might be a little bit long this go around. So we're going to be prepared for that. The other nice thing about this is if we do have an emergency situation, if we have one particular precinct where voting is really surging, we always have some precincts that have, maybe they're a precinct that's right next to the early voting site, so a lot of their voters have already voted, and we have another one that's really far away from any early voting sites, so many of them don't. If we do have a particular surge, we do have the capacity to use our ballot on demand printers to print additional ballots and have staff deliver them, on election day. So we do have a backup plan, and what we plan for is to not have to do that, because there's a lot of custody and paperwork that goes along with that is better if we don't have to do it, and make sure to have all of our ballots in place so we can deal with other issues as they arise on election day. But we do have that backup capacity as well. So so we do need the ballot order is something that the adequate number of ballots under code is something that you all have to approve. I'm basically under code. I'm supposed to prepare a plan for that, and you all have to sign off on your approval of that under Virginia Code 242-1-612.
Very well, I'll make a motion, we approve the ballot count as the General Register has outlined it.
All right, I'll second that. We're using the same mail firm for doing the sending out the mail ballots.
Yeah.
They're going to be printing everything.
They print the ballots, one at a time for mail voting. So as we get, people that sign up, and as we send out our initial mailing, they complete that process. Staff has already reviewed all the, documents and everything that go out with that stuff. So that's done really early, including getting the new sticker. That was our biggest time pressure for the sticker contest, was getting them the artwork so they could include that in all the mail ballots. The early voting ballots are all printed on demand at the polling place. The election officers have printers, and once they check in a voter, they print off the appropriate ballot for them based on their precinct for them to vote. So those mail ballots and early voting ballots are all taken care of sort of in a one-to-one scenario. The ones we're talking, this plan is just for the election day ballots, where they do not have ballot on demand printing. We want to make sure they have adequate ballots. We'll also continue to use the real ballots that get printed for our logic and accuracy process. So in addition to this order here, we'll have 50 more ballots for the testing process as well.
And we also have, there are town elections in 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4, okay. So there'll be a special ballot for those separate from the other precincts that maybe, they have a Dumfries mailing address, but they're not within the town of Dumfries. We
Yeah.
always have that.
Those ballots will have that additional, so there's a state amendment, there's a presidential race, those will be on every ballot the same. There is the congressional races, the Senate race will be on every ballot the same as well. The congressional races will vary based on where you are in the county. As a general rule, if you're north of Hoadley, it's the 10th, and if you're south of Hoadley, it's the 7th. And then, yes, three of the towns have races. I believe it's Haymarket and Occoquan and Quantico. No, I'm sorry, Dumfries. Dumfries, Quantico, and Haymarket. Okay.
Do you know when it is that, what's the deadline that the state has to sign off on the ballot proofs?
They gave us a timeline. It's tight.
Yeah, it's early September. I think
Yeah.
it's September 12th or 9th.
Okay.
So yeah, that's going to be a tough turnaround in terms of getting those. Now, we have the on-demand ballots for early voting, so that makes it a lot easier. We don't have to get ballots,
Right.
printed and shipped by that time, but we will need them for logic and accuracy. So it is a pretty tight timeline, but they have some late deadlines for some of the contests, so their hands are a little tied as well. So.
Okay. Any questions? Nope. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So we have approved the order of the number of ballots. Next is a staffing plan.
Okay, so the next couple pages in that same packet there is the staffing and election equipment plan. Again, this is kind of based on the same projections at each precinct and the number of voters that we're going to have to assist. So, total of more than 1,050 officers at all of our polling places. That equates to about 9 to 12 officers at each precinct. So, about 8 or 9 officers at our smallest precincts and maybe 12 or 13 at our largest ones. Most precincts have, 10, 11, or 12, I would say. The chief, assistant chief, and EPS, those 3 certified leadership positions will be there at each location. And we've tried to build in extra officers to rotate breaks. So if you look at the staffing plan here, you have 1 chief, 1 assistant chief, and 1 EPS. The number of poll book officers we have is equivalent to 1 more than the number of poll books. So if we have 3 poll books at a location, we want 4 poll book officers there so they can rotate throughout the day. We have a booth person, a scanner person, and a greeter person at all locations, with some of our busier locations having 2 greeters. Again, same principle. At the busier locations, those individuals can rotate throughout the day so that people get breaks. The horror of going through a presidential election in DC, where I had officers complain to me that they didn't even have time to go to the bathroom on election day because they were so busy. So we want to make sure that our officers are not only able to use the restroom, that's a baseline, but we want to make sure that officers are rested enough in a busy election that they get a chance to rotate out, have breaks, eat a meal, get a snack, take a break, so it's not just, it's a long day. So we want to make sure we have plenty of officers at our precincts. So that's why we're going to have more than 1,000 officers for this election. And hopefully what happens, and what's happened in some recent elections, is that we've had so many people use early voting and mail voting that this will be more officers than they'll actually need on election day. But that is a much better problem to have than we didn't have enough officers. And we have gotten, in our new fiscal year that just started our budget, we did get extra money for more officers for early voting, more officers for election day. So we do have funding from this, where the Board of Supervisors approved just shy of $400,000 for the particular needs of the November election, which is, more overtime, more phone calls, more officers to train, more questions to answer, more voters that are trying to register. So we do have the resources to fund all of this. In terms of our election equipment, mostly have 3 poll books to check in voters. That's in the last set here. There are 2 and 4 poll books at some precincts based on whether they're lighter or busier. We do have an extra poll book at each location for the chief and the provisional officers. Based on our totals here, we do need, I think, about 24 more poll books. Is that the right number, John? So we're gonna look at that and see what we can do to get a couple dozen more poll books to fill out this total, because this planning scenario here covers the use of about 380 poll books in total when you include the ones at the chief station for the provisional officers. 1 to 2 ballot scanners at the precincts. Our smaller ones will have 1 ballot scanner. Our busier one will have 2. It looks like it's about half and half. About half our locations will have two ballot scanners, and about half will have 1. I don't know that all of them will need 2 ballot scanners, so John and I have been talking about a cover for the second scanner so that the officers can have it open and ready, but have it covered so they don't necessarily have to use it, and the voters won't go to it. So we're working on something related to that. Obviously, if there's a line at the scanner, we want them to use it. But a lot of times we send it out there so they're ready and they don't actually need it. And as we have found, as we see from our last election where we had 1 scanner at every precinct and our results were 100% accurate, and knowing some past elections where having 2 scanners is the most common problem for election results not being recorded accurately by the officers at the precincts. So we want to make sure that they have the ballot scanners available, but don't necessarily need to use them if they don't. Each site will have 1 ADA machine, and we figure that about 12 to 18 voting booths. So we're going to have to expand the number of voting booths at a lot of our locations. And what we do to figure that out, and I'm sorry, this is a little small, oops, wrong direction. Oh, sorry, I'm going ahead. What we do to plan for this is we look at line optimization data. So here's a precinct here. This precinct has about 1,500 voters. This is a scenario where, and if you can't see this that well, we do post all this stuff online in our supplemental materials, as well as the video that follows it usually has the slides along with it as well. So we will have all this information online so you can see some of these smaller numbers a little more up close. This is what a line looks like. Now the graph here is the X line, the X-axis across is each hour of the day going by. The Y-axis going up is 15-minute intervals of how long of a wait time you'll have based on the data you put in. So this is something, I worked on this back in my days with DC. I got a grant for this, and this is a great tool that MIT has on their voter toolkit on their webpage. If any of you want to go check it out, if you look up the MIT VTP toolkit or MIT voting toolkit, you'll find this online. You can play around with the scenarios. It's if you are an election nerd like myself, it's a lot of fun. But what we see here is this is a scenario, and you can adjust all of the data at the top shows the expected voters, the number of check-in stations, the number of voting stations, how long the polling day is, how many scanners you have, so you can see where your pain points might be. So in this scenario, we have 1,500 voters expected. We have 2 check-in stations. We have 8 voting stations. And what you can see in this scenario is this is not enough check-in stations, because as you get later in the day, that yellow part of the line that creeps up there, that's the wait at the check-in station. So as you get towards the prime evening hours here, you're looking at a half-hour wait to check in. Then you're adding on top of that, the pink area there is the wait for a voting booth. So at the peak time towards the end of the day here, what you're seeing is voters having to wait a half hour to check in and another half an hour to get a voting booth, and that is not ideal. It's not ideal for the officers that are working at those locations. It's not ideal for the voters who are coming there and expecting to be able to be, processed and to complete their ballot in a timely manner. So I'm going to go to this next slide, which is the same scenario, same number of voters, but what we've done here is we've added 1 extra check-in station and we've added more voting booths. And you can see what that does is it flattens out our line. We might have a few times during the day where we have a 5 or 10 minute wait, but we're not going to go any more than a 15-minute wait in this scenario. And this planning tool, they have a lot of different composites for what the arrival pattern of the voters is. You can look at ones where there's a peak in the morning or the middle of the day. And we're going to see that this is sort of a composite of a lot of those different arrival patterns, because depending on the location, if you're talking about Heritage Hunt or senior community, you might have morning to the middle of the day is pretty busy, and then it kind of drops off towards the end. If you have a community of sort of younger families that's on a commuter route, where people might be working, you might be really dead during the morning, and then really get busy at the end of the day. So we do all this, and what we've done is the numbers you're seeing here in terms of the election equipment, the staffing, all that stuff, we've run this through, we've come up with our plan, we've run it through this line optimization tool to make sure that we don't have precincts that look like this. That's bad planning. And that we make sure we have precincts that look like this, which is good planning. Now, obviously, you can't control all of the factors. You could have a surge at a location. You could have your arrival patterns be a little bit different than you expect. But at least if you're prepared going in to have your lines be relatively short, and we shoot to say, okay, let's make nobody wait more than 15 minutes for the check-in and voting booths, then even if we have a really heavy scenario, voters can wait, 30 minutes or less, then I think we've done our job at the end of the day. Hopefully, for most of the day, most voters wait either not at all or for a very small amount of time. Ironically, studies have shown that voters really want to wait about 15 to 20 minutes. They don't like it when they go in and there's nobody there because it doesn't feel like you're part of an event. But they also don't want to wait for more than 30 minutes because at that point it's cutting into their day and their time and they get worried. So hopefully we end up in a sweet spot where people wait 5, 10, 15 minutes, but not so long that they're having to wait, to exercise their franchise. So the equipment plan is actually not something that the board has to approve, but I wanted to let the board know what our plan is there because I think it's as important as the staffing plan, if not more so in some ways. If you have a lot of officers and not enough equipment to check in voters, it really doesn't matter if you have enough officers, you can't get them through. And then the second part of that is once you have enough equipment, having a staffing plan in place and having our team do their job to make sure that we're adequately staffed, and they do excellent work on that. So under Virginia Code 24.2-115, the Electoral Board does have to acknowledge the submission of an adequate staffing plan for the upcoming election.
So we'll take it on advisement.
I've got a couple questions. So the last time that I recall that we had a serious issue with long lines was the 2012 presidential. And that was the last year that we were using the touchscreen machines. And there were a number of precincts, and several of us board members made visits, and what's the precinct on the east end of the county that had the River Oaks?
Okay.
It was a fairly large precinct, and they had long lines beginning at the very beginning of the day. And one of the challenges was with the touchscreen machines, even if all the machines were working, and in River Oaks the machines worked the entire day, there was a limit on how many people could be voting at one time. So if we had 5 machines, 5 people could vote. And a lot of times people were doing research on their phones about the constitutional amendment or something else, and we had people spending 10 or 15 minutes at a voting machine, and so the lines backed up, and they were literally lined up and down the hallways of the school, and it was just a matter of there was a finite number of people who could vote at one time. With the equipment we have now, we can have basically 12 or 18, however many voting stations there are. They're all, they can all be marking their ballot at the same time, and hopefully the only backup then would be if people waiting at the scan machine. So the new equipment, I think, will help facilitate that. Have you kept any records of how many precincts closed at 7 o'clock? And for those that still had people in line, how long was it? 7:30, 8 o'clock? Do you have any numbers about, and I mean, presidential is obviously the largest turnout, but I remember I think it was a governor's election year, where we had several precincts, even with the new equipment, where we just had a long line still at 7 o'clock.
I mean, I don't have any data on that from our recent elections since I've been here, because we haven't really had any lines at the end of the day.
Right.
If they have been, they've been really short, and they've closed within, 15 minutes of the close time, by and large. But I do know that, in terms of prepping for what we need to do so that we don't have it, and that's why that backup can be so terrible too, because oftentimes it comes at the end of the day. If you look there, you're at the end of the day. So now, not only are people waiting, but they're waiting at the very end of the day when the polls are closed, so you're not getting results from the precinct. Your officers are tired at this point now. They have a lot of people still to do. They can't close down the polling place and get home after they're tired. So it's a problem that leads to more problems. It leads to more problems, and it's why training on this is really important. And this is a area of expertise for me, because this is something, when I was in DC, we were one of the worst rated states in terms of lines when I started there. So we got a grant. I worked with counties across the country. I worked with counties in Minnesota and Indiana and North Carolina and Maryland and even British Columbia and Canada, and helped them to develop plans around this stuff. I think the election community as a whole has really matured on this and is much better at looking at some of the metrics that you need to know how long does it take to check in a voter? How do you project roughly how long it's going to take a voter to vote a ballot in a different election? Because depending on the size of your ballot, it could be 1 minute or it could be 8 minutes. And so you have to factor all that stuff in. So we've done that in building this and looking at our equipment to make sure we work it. But you're right, those touch screens were problematic in both the record of voting. Then with paper voting, you have a physical thing, you have a digital image, and you have a physical thing, so you have multiple backups to the process where you can verify things. And then the other thing that it does is if you have a lot of voters coming in, you can get them through check-in. If you've got those voting booths or just the 3 or 4 machines that you've got, well, now you've got a backup there. Whereas with voting stations, you can really expand that. And if people are, if they're ready to vote, they get innovative with it. They go, this table will work fine, and they'll take their paper ballot over and they'll fill it out. And we try to expand the number of voting booths that we have, but you can get more creative with paper ballots in terms of helping assisting voters to vote their ballot and then get it scanned than you can with the GRE machines, the touchscreen machines that used to be more commonplace, especially in the early 2000s and into the 2010s.
Right. Well, and the absentee voting rules have changed completely. I mean, we had very restrictive early absentee rules in 2012, and they've changed considerably. But it was close to 11 o'clock before we finished the last voter in River Oaks that year. So, when you're doing the training, so I've noticed there are some chiefs that, for whatever reason, they want all standing voting machine. They don't want tables. They want everybody. I guess they think they'll get in and out quicker if they only have the standing. So try and encourage them to do, to have plenty of both tables for people that need to sit, and then the other standing machine, voting booths. But I just think the more options for voters, the better it is, and the quicker they get through.
I think we have a limited number of standing ones, unfortunately. They just take up more space. It's very easy. Those little tabletop things, you can stack 10 of those in almost no space and add them to a tabletop. So you're right that statistically, the standing booths, voters, they get to that. There's no time to stand up, to sit down, to make sure you're not hitting the chair into somebody. So it does make the process go faster. And we do, especially for early voting, we have almost all standing voting booths. But some of that is just a transport issue of how many.
Get it to the site.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we only have enough to give 2.5 per precinct at the moment. That's our inventory.
Yeah. But we'll take a look at that and see if we can do something.
All right. So, is there anyone that would like to offer any public comment?
Keith, do you want to pass a motion on the acknowledgement of the staffing plan?
Sure, okay. I think we,
That's it, I take it under advisement.
Well, we can do it at the next meeting. If you guys want to look at it and come back to the next meeting, we'll go ahead and prepare it. And if you guys want to add a few more officers, we can do that.
okay,
Do you want to do that, table that until the next meeting?
sure.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we've agreed to also table the issue of the review of the
GR
registrar
evaluation.
until Mark can be here. So do we have any other business for closed session?
No, so I just have the next meeting, I noted that July 22nd. We will have a public meeting, but that meeting will be basically just a closed session to the board to, evaluate me. That's a statutory requirement that before August 1st of each year, they review my performance. So I suppose if you want to come to that meeting, no public comments, there will be that. But that will mostly be a closed session. There's not going to be any other content there. August 22nd, that's the meeting, that's the August meeting that's scheduled. That will be meeting about general election preparation. We'll have a report on voter registration, update on that process. We'll talk about some of the things that we're doing to improve the mail voting process, including, we talked a little bit earlier about the curing process and some changes we've made to improve that. Need some update on a transparency initiative. A couple of them actually that we're exploring right now, and a review of the electoral board GR duties, something that we do annually to make sure that those are in alignment with what the board wants to do. So that's it for today.
All right. Do you have anything else?
No,
Okay, do we have a motion?
Do we have any to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I think I don't know if were there any public comments? Oh no, nobody signed up. Okay.
All right, I'll second that. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.